When you do sign up, please make sure you sign and print legibly. So when I type your certification out, it's right. And before I get started, everybody might as well move up to the front row because I'm going to not start until everybody's up front. So might as well move up. Are you good, Matt? Okay. We're going to go ahead and get started. This training usually takes about an hour and a half, depending on participation, sometimes 2 hours. So we'll get through it pretty quickly, but just plan on an hour and a half, something like that. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jeff Helmuth. Lived in this county and pretty much raised in this area all of my life, other than about 6 months, which was in California. I've been a paramedic with LaGrange County, this county, for 26 years. So my roots are very deep in this county. I've also been a coroner, either elected official or deputy coroner, chief deputy coroner for 16 years. So I get to see a lot of stuff that normal people shouldn't see. Some of this I'm going to talk and be more specific with either police, fire, or EMS. But this is one of the trainings that I've been looking forward most, and that's in the church setting. And we're going to talk a lot about it at the end. As we go through the training, it is a set training, so I'm not going to deviate from the training so much, but I would like to have a conversation with a lot of people afterwards, and we'll talk as a group. So, give you a couple warnings. One, I am a wanderer. I wander around a lot. I don't stand still. I get that honestly from my mother. She wandered. She was up at the crack of dawn, and for all of you that know her, she was a fart in a skillet. I get it honestly. Second thing, if you have a personal issue with some of the things that we talk about, because it is tough, it is hard, it's okay to leave. Step out. I will tell you there's somebody here that will come and check on you. Because suicide is it's a hard subject to talk about. And as we go through the training, hopefully that's going to be a little easier by the end of the evening. But those are my 2 disclaimers. So if you need to leave, that's fine. Even if you have to go to the restroom, that person's still going to follow you out. They will check on you on the way back. It's fine. But that's part of what we do in this training because it is a very touchy subject. So how did we get here? Back in 2016, Parkview LaGrange worked with the county, and they did what they call a community needs assessment. They do that every year. What does our community need? So they did a community needs assessment within the schools. So all 3 schools did a survey. And as we go through this training, there's some things that really raise the hair on my arms, and this is why we partially started this training. 33% of them said they've experimented with drugs and alcohol in the past 6 months. These are high school kids. 12% of them do not feel they have an adult in their life they can talk to about life struggles. 55% of them know someone who struggles with suicidal thinking. So over half of the kids know somebody. 26% of them have thoughts of suicide themselves. That's a quarter of our students in schools. That's the part that raises the hair on my arms. Students believe the biggest problem they have is alcohol, drugs, compared to harassment, bullying, and crime. So the suicide portion popped up like a big wildfire. We knew that we had to do something within the schools. At the same time, within the coroner's department, we knew from 2015 to 2016, we had a huge jump in suicides. Documented suicide. And I say documented because that's all we can really say is there's many more suicides out there, we just can't document that there were. So coupled with those two things, we decided we had to do something. So we made a committee within Parkview LaGrange, and there's 9 of us on this committee. All 9 of us went to what they call QPR, which is, you'll understand what QPR is by the end of the evening. There's a video that will show a little bit. But QPR is a program that's for suicide prevention, and it's very easily taught. It's very easily understood. It's very easy for everybody to understand. It's very easy for everybody to go out and apply in the public setting. So we are doing this as a community. I've done every LaGrange County police officer. I've done 3 fire departments. I've done, I don't know how many different people in the community settings. Once again, I wanted to do this one. We actually have 2 churches. I've got LaGrange Church of God doing it at the end of this month. This one I'm looking forward to. So we're branching out in LaGrange County to try to get our arms around this problem. And as we go through statistics, you'll see why. So that's how we got to where we are, and that's how we are doing our QPR training. I'm going to show the first video, which is basically just about suicide as a whole. So go ahead and play the.
It may be hard to imagine, but according to the World Health Organization, over 800,000 people die each year by suicide. That is more people than are killed in all the wars and homicides combined. Of these deaths each year, more than 40,000 are Americans. That is 1 death by suicide every 13 minutes. Suicide affects every region of the world and is the 3rd highest cause of death for people aged 15 to 44. And for every life lost, another 25 people will attempt suicide, often causing serious medical injury or lifelong disability. Today, the greatest loss of life is among working-aged men, 35 to 65 years old. Men of all races and ethnicities are at higher risk. And from the very young to the very old, millions of Americans think seriously about suicide for days, weeks, and even years. Thinking seriously about suicide is itself a kind of misery index, a sign that something is terribly wrong and needs attention. Most often, what needs attention and treatment is clinical depression, a medical condition that is now the leading cause of disability in the world. In America alone, there are an estimated 15 million sufferers. Most of us are touched by suicide. Some of us have lost family members, loved ones, friends, schoolmates, or colleagues. None of us escapes the loss of people we admire and respect, whether they are people we know or are much-loved musicians, artists, and entertainers. If you have lost someone close to you to suicide, then you already know the considerable cost, the tears and awful pain of loss. And if you are one of the millions who have thought seriously about suicide, then you already know just how lonely and terrible it is to suffer alone. Depression, anxiety, substance abuse, bipolar, and thought disorders like schizophrenia all contribute great risk for suicidality. Yet most people suffering from a mental illness do not kill themselves. They get help, they find a way, and they recover to live full and productive lives. And if recovery is possible, that means suicide is preventable. Thankfully, the world is changing. We understand mental illness. We understand suicide. and we know that treatment saves lives. Right now, our teachers don't teach us about depression and suicide, and our faith leaders often struggle to talk openly about these topics. Too often, doctors can't talk to their patients about suicide, even patients who are sitting in their offices planning how to end their lives, perhaps by overdosing on the medication being prescribed to them. The world remains dangerously ignorant about suicide. So to save lives, we must bring this subject out of the shadows. Effective treatment would save thousands of lives around the world. But we must learn to talk comfortably about suicide, and we need your help to start the conversation. Join us in this fight, a fight to save lives. Preventing suicide, it's what people do.
You can close that one and bring up the first PowerPoint, which has that's called pre-slides or pre-QPR. So that video talked about schools. I've mentioned schools. We surveyed the schools, and we knew there was a need. 25% of our kids were thinking about suicide. So the first thing we did in association with Lutheran, it's actually not Lutheran Hospital, but it's a Lutheran network. They have a foundation that they give out grants. So we went and got grant money for QPR training in Lakeland School. Trained over 200 people in Lakeland School, from teachers to counselors to guidance counselors to maintenance people to anybody that works in the school. So everybody at Lakeland High School has been trained in QPR that deals with kids. That has since moved on, and Westview, I believe, is done, and Prairie Heights is being done. Coupled with that, it went to the State House in June. So the 1st of July is effective law that beginning of next year. QPR has to be trained in every school in the state of Indiana before school starts. And that is a huge, huge win for everybody, for QPR, but suicide prevention as a whole. Because as we see, there's I've mentioned it, 25% of our kids are thinking about suicide. We've got to get them when they're young. And when I say young, 7 years old is the youngest one that I've seen that has taken his own life. I've seen 92-year-olds and 7-year-olds. So I'm going to talk to the kids here. I'm going to talk to the adults. And once again, these are touchy subjects, but parents need to have conversations with your kids. There was a movie, and it's out, or a series called 13 Reasons Why. Anybody seen it? Anybody heard about it? Oh, yeah. Everybody's heard about 13 Reasons Why. I'm not going to mention a whole lot about it. I have not personally seen it. I may in the future, but right now I don't believe it's something I should be watching. I will say I would like to believe that they've done that for good reasons, and I believe there are good reasons. And one of them is they're having conversations with their kids. And I believe all the schools in our county have sent out notifications. They've talked multiple times to the kids and the students and the parents to have those conversations. So that suicide talk, or that what they talked about in the video, raising the awareness, is happening in LaGrange County. It's also happening in the state of Indiana. So kudos. It's going to take a while. Second thing they talked about was faith leaders. That's why I wholeheartedly wanted to come to the first one here. I believe the one at the end of this month is going to be equally, but I live a life of faith. Faith in suicide, hell, damnation, suicide, sin, all those things are taboo. And those are conversations that also need to happen. And they are happening. But we'll have those conversations at the end. Like I said, I don't want to steer clear of that. Doctors. Doctors have their head in the sand about suicide and mental health. I've trained 3 weeks ago all of the doctors within LaGrange County. So all the physicians that you guys see on a daily basis, I've trained them in QPR. I will give an example, and Vanna White, my beautiful assistant, which happens to be my wife, Tanya, she's going to help me at the end, but I will tell a story, and I'm going to use her as an example because it was. As you guys will find out, Tanya had some personal issues, so she went to the doctor to get something to help her out. She walked in, talks to him. It's been a long time since you've had this prescription. I don't think I can give it to you. She says, well, my son just committed suicide. Let me give you a prescription. And he gave her a prescription for 90 days of medication just like that. Never once asked her how she's doing. Never once asked her anything about her mental health, and just wrote a prescription. I gave that story to every one of those mech doctors, and I hope it hit home. I slapped them pretty hard, and rightfully so, because they have their head in the sand. So hopefully that also helps. So those are the three things within the video that I wanted to talk about. So 2016, which we don't get the CDC or the health department numbers until usually late June. We've just got some of the preliminaries, so this is 2016. And these are by state, so every state is listed here. And Indiana is, I say, back up to 14.25. What that is 14.25 people per 100,000. So 14.25 people out of 100,000 commit suicide in 2016. So if you break that down in LaGrange County, we have about 50,000 people in the county, give or take. So we should be around 7. And that's about where we are. So we're not out of the norm, but as we go through some of the statistics, you'll see why it was alarming. So back in 2015, we were 14.4, so it went up, and then we're back down. In 2014, we were 14.25. The biggest thing about this slide is that graph goes up every year, and that is something we have to change. We need to make that graph go down, not up. Up means more suicides every year, so we need that graph to go down. Suicide rates by age, mentioned it in the videos. The biggest chunk are between 24 to 34, 35 to 44. But you can see there's a huge chunk in the middle there, and those are the people that are middle age. They do go a lot less. I said 7 and 92, and we'll talk about the statistics in LaGrange County itself. Suicide rates by ethnicity. Most of the time it's white, and most of the time they're males. So as we talk about statistics and race and ethnicity, why would your blacks, why would your American or your Hispanics, because those are the ones on the lower side, why would they be so low compared to whites? Anybody have an idea? Religion. They have huge religion based in their ethnicity. Hispanics are what? Typically Catholic. So they have a huge religion base. Blacks as well have a very huge religion base. Doesn't make them exempt, but by far and large, partially because their suicide rates are lower because of religion. There's another one. They have a huge family support. They are very tight-knit. They're very family-oriented. And I believe, and most people believe, those are the two reasons why their suicide rates are lower. So, kudos to everybody here that goes to church. Trust me, it does make a difference. It's not up here, but why are our suicide rates not high in the Amish community? And they are in the regular community. Do you hear about suicides in the Amish community? No. Once again, do we know, can we document? I've not personally ran on or had a coroner case within my 16 years that have had an Amish person. It comes back to those same two reasons. I believe it's because of their religion and because of their faith base and because of their family. So it does make a huge difference. It just means that I worry more about everybody here. Suicide deaths by method. Sorry, kids. Firearm is the number one reason, or number one way they take their life, followed by suffocation, which includes drownings and hangings. Video talked about popular musicians. A lot of people were, we talked about it. Like I said, we'll talk about the 3 reasons why, but we have a family support group that we go to, Tanya and I, for suicide survivors. And one of the things we talked about is the musician that took his own life about 2 weeks ago, Chester, I can't remember his last name, Bennington. Another very well-known musician in the rock group, but took his own life a couple weeks ago. How does that affect people? Well, for us, it affects us greatly because it puts us back in that day that we had. But those types of people and people that are in the realm of being, I talk about it, being football players, being basketball players, you have mentors, all kinds of other things, and the rock people do. I mean, they have mentors. That affects a lot of people when they take their own life and do it by suicide. So this is what when I started doing some searching about Indiana. Officials say Indiana has many barriers to accessible and affordable mental health services, but Indiana has the highest rate in the country of teens who have considered suicide and the second highest rate of those who attempted it. Indiana leads the nation in teen suicide. That's why I say again, that's why the hair on my arms stand up. It's because we need to take care of our kids. We need to talk to them. Geographically also does affect suicide rates. So you have the West Coast, you have the East Coast, you have Texas, Illinois. What are common about those? And why are their rates so low? So they're below 12.6 per 100,000. Why do you think their rates would be that low? I would love to live by the ocean. Absolutely. That'd make me happy every day. That's possibly why. But it could have an effect. It is. It's more urban. There's more people per capita. There's a lot more people in those areas. So there's a lot more people to look at. I mean, a lot more people to have around you. There's a lot more resources. So you'll see that around the bigger urban areas. So that's why you have a larger city, Chicago. Texas is very largely populated. California is obviously very largely populated. And then on the East Coast. So proportionally then, why would we call it the Midwest, or North Dakota, South Dakota, my United States map doesn't work too well, but New Mexico, those areas out there, why would those have the highest rates? Sparsely populated, very, very rural. A lot of these farmers, a lot of these guys are by themselves for weeks on end, so you have isolation. So if you have a mental illness, which part of biggest chunk of what suicide leads to or has a following of is mental health. If you don't have that and you're all by yourself, isolation is your worst enemy. So that's why they have the highest rates. You also notice that American Indians also led right below whites. As American Indians have one of the highest ones, partially because they're very rural. They're very out in the Northwest, or out isolated. So this is by Indiana county. Number 1 county in Indiana is Sullivan, followed by Park, Switzerland. Those are all where? Yeah, rural Indiana, very rural Indiana. So it follows Indiana as well as the United States. Now LaGrange County is, out of all the counties, 87th out of 92. That's not bad. That was a 9.27, so a 9.27 per 100,000. So we're a little higher than what our average should be in 2000. I believe that was 15. These are LaGrange County numbers in 2015. So we had 2 documented cases in 2015. So our national average, our Indiana average, should be around 7. So we had we call it a good year. Prior to that, I believe it was 4. So we've seen it coming down. But it follows the statistics. They're both white, they're both males, both gunshot. But look at the ages of these guys. 75 and 92. As we go through this, and we'll talk about some of the red flags, you'll understand or have an idea why 75 and 92. We keep an eye on these people. 2016, so we go from 2 and 15 to 7 in 2016. That's a big jump. That was at the same time, that's why I said we've done a community needs assessment. So we looked at this huge jump and thought we need to get on it. They're all white, except for 1. Mostly males. Had 1 female. Follows the statistics, gunshot wounds, asphyxia by hanging. But the ages, once again, all over the place. Youngest was 17. That was a Lakeland High School student. And when we go through some of the indicators, he had many, many indicators. So I won't talk specifically about his case now, but we will later on. This was a news clipping out of WSBT. They did a suicidal thoughts in kids. So these conversations are happening out there, and that's a good thing. It really is. We talked about our why. That's my son, Christopher James. Lost him in 2015 to suicide. So it does hit personally for me and Tanya. I will say every time I do these trainings, it's therapeutic for me, because the more I talk about it, the more I get it out. So it is good for me. Now, I do feel guilty at times because I don't have Christopher anymore. Christopher took his own life, and it's one of the things we'll talk about at the end. Some of the struggles I had to deal with my own faith, my own relationship. So that's my why. That's why I do QPR. That's why I do suicide training. So suicide, there's really 3 areas of suicide that we're going to look at in this county. There's prevention, which is what we're doing, QPR. There's crisis, which if somebody's in crisis, suicide crisis, there's assist training, applied suicide, something training, I don't remember what the I was. I'm also assist trained, which to be an assist trainer, you can go man the suicide hotline. So I've taken that assist training as well. So I don't know that we're ever going to do that in LaGrange County, because there is a national hotline that we can call, and we'll give you that number and we'll talk about how to do that. And then there's family support after. So I mentioned that. Tanya and I do a support group. A 10-day support group on the 3rd Thursday of every month at Parkview LaGrange Hospital. It is a group of suicide survivors. They meet for 2 hours in the evenings. I say the group is growing. That's a bad thing. But it's a good thing to have that support group, because we can talk about it. Grief is grief. Everybody goes through grief the same way, all over the place. It doesn't map out normally, but when you add suicide to that grief, it's a different ballgame. And to have a group full of people that have went through that specific, it does help us. So those are the 3 things that we've done in LaGrange County. So if you know anybody that has, or personally, and I can guarantee somebody in this room has been affected by suicide, let them know that we do have a support group on the 3rd Thursday at the hospital. So I'm going to have Matt show another video that goes specifically about what QPR is. This should be the 2nd video on the Internet Explorer. Yeah, that one right there. And you may have to shut PowerPoint off. I don't know, sometimes it's funny about that.
Research shows that the odds of surviving a heart attack in a public place are 10 times greater in regions where thousands of ordinary citizens are trained in CPR. It's called bystander rescue. When someone shows signs of experiencing cardiac arrest, the response of nearby friends, family, or coworkers is critical. The effective use of CPR doubles or triples one's chances of surviving a heart attack. Like CPR, QPR is an emergency intervention for someone experiencing a life-threatening crisis. QPR is easy to learn and easy to remember, but it takes courage to overcome our fears about reaching out to help someone who may be considering suicide. Research also shows that where QPR is widely taught, suicide attempts and deaths decrease. Just like CPR, QPR requires quick, bold, and informed action. Because suicide, like heart attacks, remains a rare event, we must train hundreds to save one, thousands to save hundreds, and millions to save thousands. There is an old Welsh saying, "No great misery goes unspoken." When we have a toothache, we tell people. We don't hide our pain. But because of the stigma and taboo around the word suicide, many people considering suicide don't speak plainly about their suffering. They fear our rejection. They fear that if they say something, we will ridicule them or make fun of them. As a result, people thinking about suicide often use indirect language. They hint at what they're thinking of doing. They send us coded messages, and they suffer in silence. Called suicide warning signs, QPR training teaches you how to recognize these warning signs, quickly decode them, and then question the person in an informed and compassionate manner to learn if they are considering suicide. Just as talking about physical pain helps diminish it, talking about suicide with someone willing and able to listen reduces psychological pain almost immediately. Trained QPR gatekeepers are merchants of hope, and hope helps prevent suicide. Millions of people have now been trained in QPR. Rigorous independent research studies support QPR as effective, and thousands of personal stories assure us that QPR is saving lives. When you use QPR, not everyone will be suicidal. Some people are simply stressed to the breaking point, but they still need help. Help you can give. Please note that you cannot put the idea of suicide into someone's mind. People are either thinking about suicide or they're not. The fear of putting the idea of suicide into someone's head is a myth that keeps us from acting when we should do just the opposite. QPR is a universal intervention for people in pain, whether they're thinking about suicide or not. While it takes a special courage to overcome our fears, we will teach you how to ask about suicide and to offer hope through listening. Listening is the power tool that restores hope in the hopeless. We know you can do this, and we will show you how. Preventing suicide. It's what people do.
You can bring up the gatekeeper PowerPoint. When I do the police officer training, and which I have done most of them, I asked Stan, and Carl for that matter, if I can get the police officers here tonight. I'm going to try to hit every police officer in this county because these are the guys that I worry about the most. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to ask Stan, can you own a gun or have a license to carry a gun if you take certain medications for mental illness? I believe you shouldn't. Can you be a police officer and take certain medications? Most places you cannot. You can take Wellbutrin, you can take some of the smaller non-controlled substances and still carry a gun and still be a police officer and still maintain your job status. So what happens to these guys if they have a mental illness problem, if they have a problem, which they're out there. I know they're there. I personally have correspondence with 2 of them within the county that talk to me on a regular basis about suicide, but can't do a thing about it.
because they're going to lose their job. I worry about these guys more than anybody because they won't tell us of fear of losing their job or their career, because it is. It's a career for them. That's their livelihood. So I worry about them. And I'm going to tell everybody here in this room that's done this training, and from now on, you're going to understand why. Next time you see them, you're going to ask them how they're doing, and then you're going to really ask them how they're doing, because they need to be honest with you. These guys need to have guardian angels watching over them. So I worry about them. I worry about them a lot, and I worry about them every day. QPR, ask a question, save a life. That's exactly what it is. It's basically a program designed by Dr. Quinnett many, many years ago. I'm surprised it hasn't come more front mainline, but suicide has been a taboo. Suicide has been a subject that has been under the table for many, many years. It's finally starting to come to light. It is question, persuade, and refer. We question them, we persuade them to get help, and then we refer them to that help in some form or fashion. It is not intended to be counseling. That is and honestly, what the doctors had the biggest problem with is we don't have to counsel them. We just have to give them the resources to get help. We're going to recognize it, which is very easy. It is intended to offer hope, because I'm going to talk about hopelessness later on. But what these people need is just a glimmer of hope. And that's all we're going to provide them is hope. And the video even mentioned that. That's all we want to do is talk to them. And what's generally going to happen is they're going to open up to you, and then hopefully they get a glimmer of hope. Suicide myths and facts. No one can stop a suicide. It is inevitable. Is that a myth or a fact? It is a myth. Absolutely. We can stop it. If people in a crisis can get help they need, they will probably never be suicidal again. That is correct. That is correct. It's fact. Confronting a person about suicide will only make them angry and increase the risk of suicide. No, it's a myth. Asking someone directly about suicide intent lowers anxiety, opens up communication, and lowers the risk of an impulsive act. It's true. Absolutely. Only experts can prevent a suicide. Everybody here can. Suicide prevention is everybody's business, and anyone can help prevent the tragedy of suicide. Fact. Suicidal people keep their plans to themselves? No. They will tell you in clues. Most suicidal people communicate their intent sometime during the week preceding their attempt. That is true. They do. Those who talk about suicide don't do it. That is a myth. Unfortunately, one of the things that I know is I'm not going to be able to save everybody. It's what the video talked about. We train hundreds to save one. We train thousands to save hundreds. We train millions to save. We're not going to get everybody, but we want to see that decline instead of increase. People who talk about suicide may try or even complete an act of self-destruction. It's true. Once a person decides to complete suicide, there's nothing anyone can do to stop them. That is a myth. Suicide is the most preventable kind of death, and almost any positive action may save a life. It's true. How can I help? Ask a question. It's kind of a good illustration. There's one survivor there's several survivors of the Golden Gate Bridge. People who jump off the Golden Gate Bridge generally don't survive. There's been a couple. One of them is actually doing a talking circuit right now as a suicide survivor. I think his name's Mark, but anyhow. His story that day, he said, when I got up in the morning, I knew what I wanted to do. I told myself, if anybody asks about me that day on the way out to the Golden Gate Bridge, I will not jump. So he lives in San Francisco, has to take 2 different transit buses or 2 different trains to get out to the Golden Gate Bridge. The whole time he was on this
journey. He's got tears in his eyes. He's crying, obviously distraught. So he's in a public bus, public transportation. Not one person says anything to him. He gets out to the Golden Gate Bridge, walks out. There's a couple there. They ask politely if they could take your picture since they're on the Golden Gate Bridge. So he snaps a picture of them, jumps over. Yeah, exactly. Wow. All we have to do is ask. I don't care if you're in line at the post office. I don't care if you're in line at McDonald's. I don't care if you're in church. I don't care if you're at home. We need to ask. If you walk up to somebody and they look distraught, I'm going to stop what I'm doing and I'm going to turn around. I'm going to ask them, are you okay? It looks like you're having a bad day. That's as easy as this is. You just have to ask that question. Suicide clues and warning signs. Obviously, the more clues you get, the greater the risk. We'll talk about some of those with Christopher. Take all of them very seriously. Direct verbal clues. If somebody tells you, I'm going to kill myself, that's pretty direct. I mean, I don't think most people will miss that. I wish I were dead. I'm going to commit suicide. I'm going to end it all. If such and such doesn't happen, I'm going to kill myself. Now, once again, normally the training I do is 18 years or older. There's kids in this room, but I'm going to use them as an example. Mom and Dad, I want a pony. Nope. Sorry, you're not going to get a pony. I'm going to go kill myself. Do you need to have a conversation with that child? Yes, you do. Absolutely. I'm telling you because 7-year-olds are committing suicide. So we cannot continue to keep going the way we are and overlook some of these direct verbal clues. We need to ask that question. Indirect verbal clues. I'm tired of life. I just can't go on. 75 and a 92-year-old. Both of them lost their wives not too long before. Just tired of life. I can about imagine at some point in time and in the last 2 weeks of their life, I'm just tired of life. I just don't want to go on. I'm sure somebody heard it and didn't do anything about it. My family would be better off without me. It's another one. Christopher told me that in his text the day he committed suicide. He said, sorry for every heartache I've caused you, which is basically the same thing as that. My family would be better off without me. Who cares if I'm dead anyway? I just want out. I won't be around much longer. Pretty soon you won't have to worry about me. Those are mostly elderly. Those are the ones that we have to ask those questions. Behavioral clues. Any previous suicide attempts? Obviously, if somebody had a previous suicide attempt, suicidal ideations is what we call those. They're at a huge increased risk for suicide again. 2015, 2016, between those 2 years, we had a 63% increase in suicide ideations as well as suicide attempts. So just people calling 911 to say, I'm going to commit suicide has been up. Acquiring or a gun or stockpiling pills. Stockpiling pills is a good one. That's one of them I talk to the doctors about. Somebody comes in and says, I'm out of my medication. Well, why are you out of your medication? I just gave it to you the last 30 days. So they're starting to stockpile medications. Acquiring a gun, once again, most of the time guns get acquired by illegal. I mean, as these guys can attest, anybody can get a gun if they really want to. Co-occurring depression, moodiness, or hopelessness. I mentioned hopelessness. Hopelessness is basically the last stage. If somebody loses hope in life, what do they have to live for? And hopelessness is the last phase before somebody does commit suicide. If you don't have it, why live? Putting personal affairs in order. We had a case a couple months ago of a lady that she passed away. But during the investigation, we figured out that she changed her beneficiary on her life insurance policy 3 times within the last month. Does that give anybody any red clues, any red flags? Absolutely. So it's just a behavioral clue. So if you have somebody in your family that's changing their will or doing some things different, that's a little out of ordinary, ask them, why are you doing that? Giving away prized possessions. Christopher gave his dog away 5 days prior to committing suicide. I hate using the word committing. We're not supposed to use the word commit. It's a bad thing. Before Christopher took his own life, he loved that dog with all his heart. 5 days, once again, 5 days prior to that, Christopher colored his hair purple. His dog had purple hair, and then he gave him away. I did not know that until after the fact. One of his friends told me that, and once again, that was a huge behavioral sign. Didn't know it. Sudden interest or disinterest in religion. Once again, I love having these conversations at church because can religious people commit suicide? Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you have somebody that goes to church all the time, is very religious, very doing the right things, and suddenly they're gone or you don't know where they're at, I'd be looking for them, talking to them, and you have somebody new. Drugs or alcohol abuse or relapse after recovery period. Drugs, alcohol abuse, and suicide are a cocktail that just never wins. That's a huge red flag or a behavioral clue. And then unexplained anger, aggression, or irritability. I don't know why this happened, but the day that Christopher took his life, I called his girlfriend to try to figure out maybe she knew where he was. He gave me a clue, and that was all he gave me. And first question out of her mouth was, does he have anger or behavioral issues? I was like, what kind of a question is that? I'm asking you where my son is. I think he committed suicide. Why would she ask me that question? Well, because he's been having anger issues in the last couple weeks. So there was another behavioral clue that I didn't see. I mean, Christopher's my prodigal son. He got in trouble way back when he was 15, 16. I had to play tough love with him. He moved out, been on his own for many, many years. Went back, got a GED, got his life back together, was doing pretty good, got engaged just recently before his death. So that unexplained aggression or irritability was a red flag that I didn't see. So I didn't see him for a long time. She saw it. Situational clues. Being fired or being expelled from school. 17-year-old from Lakeland was expelled from school, kicked out of school. That was his clue. Christopher, that morning that he took his own life, actually got in a fight with his fiancée at work. She said some pretty nasty things to him. And I will tell you right now, and I told Tanya this many, many times, he who has no sin, let them throw the first stone. That's easy to say, harder and hard to practice. Christopher left work knowing fully well he was going to be fired. So that was another situational clue. A recent unwanted move. Why would that be an increased risk? I'll give you an example. Husband gets a new job out in Texas. Great job. Wife's from around here. Has no family out there, so she goes with him out to his new job, and she's isolated. She's by herself. She has no friends. She's got nothing going on. Unexpected move or unwanted move is a huge clue. Loss of any major relationship. Obviously lose a spouse, lose a loved one, what have you not. Death of a spouse, child, best friend, especially by suicide. Even me, more Tanya, has an increased risk because we've had a child or somebody that's died by suicide. Not only Christopher, my cousin, committed suicide 2 years prior, so Christopher knew that. There was a connection there. So we've lost two of our people in our very close family to suicide. Diagnosis of a serious or terminal illness. Dr. Kevorkian. Everybody remember Dr. Kevorkian? Is he doing good or is he doing bad? Everybody here has to struggle with that decision. And we'll talk a little bit about that at the end, but somebody has a terminal illness. I'm not sure that I'd want to go on living if I knew I was going to die anyhow. I'd love to go see my maker. I'd love to go see Christopher. I'd love to go see my dad. Is it wrong? I'm going to tell you, suicide's wrong. That's what I believe. It's wrong. But I'm also telling you there's some situations where I'm not thinking it would be completely wrong. Terminal illness. What about somebody in the church that's been a staple, been a great and faithful servant all their life? At the end of their life, old age is setting in, and they tell you, I just want to go home. Is that suicidal thinking? Is that suicidal ideation or not? Everybody here has to struggle with that question. All I'm saying is we have to open up our minds a little bit because the situation's different. Anticipated loss of financial security. Obviously, back in 2008, there was a huge curve because a lot of people lost their job, a lot of people in the financial industry. That'd be something I'd be concerned about. Loss of a cherished therapist, counselor, or teacher. Never really thought much about the counselor part, or a teacher, but since we did our community needs assessment, Parkview Behavioral Health as a person in LaGrange County, 5 days a week. 3 days a week, they're in Dr. Sharp's office on LaGrange. The other days, and even during those days that they're in the office there, they do spend time at all 3 schools. So we put somebody in as a counselor for PBH. So you have a child or somebody that's in school, or even an adult, that goes to a counselor that's really helping. They're making inroads with them. They're getting better. All of a sudden that counselor leaves. What happens? They've lost their stability. They've lost their good way of life. And it can spiral them pretty quickly. So that's another situation. Fear of becoming a burden to others. Talks about that. Christopher felt like he was a burden. Tips for asking a suicide question. If in doubt, don't wait. Ask the question. And I'm going to tell you, people are not going to be upset with you for asking. They're going to say, no, you know what, I'm just having a bad day. Or, yes, I am thinking about it. But you don't want to wait. If the person is reluctant, be persistent. Keep talking to them. That's what it takes. Talk to them in a private setting. Don't do it in front of a whole bunch of people. Pull them off the side if you need to. Allow the person to talk freely. God gave us 2 ears, 1 mouth. We should use them appropriately. It's a great saying. Give yourself plenty of time. That's a hard one, because if I'm busy doing something, or I'm going somewhere, or if I'm in line at Walmart, or if I'm in the post office, I have things to do. I have 20 things I have to do today. But if I come across somebody that I need to talk to and spend a little time with them, I'm wiping my slate clean. I don't care what else goes on. I'm going to ask them. Have your resources handy. A QPR card, we'll pass those out at the end. Phone numbers, counselor's name, and any other information might help. We'll give you a booklet and some magnets and stuff. It's really how you ask the question is less important than you do ask it. So that's the biggest thing that we want to get across is I'm not going to walk by that person anymore. If I see that person, I'm going to back up. I'm going to talk to them. And it has changed the way I look at everybody. I mean, I've asked that question I don't know how many times in the last 6 months now. It's just easy for me. A less direct approach, and these are very easy to do, and it's no different than having a conversation with them. Have you been unhappy lately? What's going on? Looks like you've had a bad day. Can you tell me about it? That's all it is, just asking questions. The one that gets a little trickier is, do you ever wish you'd go to sleep and never wake up? It's a little less direct, but yeah, a lot of people say, yeah, I do. It's more of a direct approach. You know, when people are upset and seem to be, sometimes they wish you were dead. I'm wondering if you feel that way too. You look pretty miserable. I wonder if you're thinking about suicide. I like that one. It's a very easy approach. And are you thinking about killing yourself? If you
can't ask the question, find someone who can. Last week, had a jailer, no, actually it wasn't a jailer. He's a jailer, but he also works at the courthouse. Called me out of the blue. I've done his trainings, QPR training. One of his co-workers, I don't even know who it is, said he having some issues. He snapped at somebody that was in line, and he knows that he's going to probably lose his job because he's got a failed drug test coming up. He asked him, and he said no, but he said, I need to talk to you about it because I want to find out if it's okay if I give you his number if he calls you. I said, absolutely. So he didn't feel comfortable about it, so he said he wouldn't mind if I would call him. So if you can't ask somebody, call somebody who can. How not to ask a suicide question? You're not thinking of killing yourself, are you? Well, that's pretty stupid. Well, they're going to say, well, no. Why would I do that? Suicide's a dumb idea. Sure, you're not thinking about suicide. Don't do it that way. We need to care about these people. How to persuade somebody to stay alive? Listen to the problem, give them your full attention. We need to listen to them. Like I said, 2 ears, 1 mouth. Remember, suicide is not the problem, only a solution to a perceived and solvable problem. We have a couple of books that we read here every now and then. I mean, suicide, the forever decision, because that's what it is. Somebody commits suicide, it's forever. It's not a temporary thing. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem, because that's what people have, is temporary problems. They just can't see a way around it, so they end their life. Don't rush to judge. There's only one person that can judge. Unfortunately, they killed him 2,000 years ago. We're not the judge. Once again, he who has no sin, throw the first stone. Offer hope in any form. That's what they need. They need hope. Persuade them. Will you go with me to get help? That's what we ultimately want, is for them to get help. They need to go see somebody, a counselor, a doctor, because there's a good chance that it could be just a medical imbalance, chemical imbalance, something like that. They need medication to fix that. One of the doctors down at Parkview is doing some research, and right now is having great results on it. Hopefully they're going to be able to spin this out to the rest of the United States, but he's doing genetic testing. So every person that comes into PBH gets genetically tested, and he matches up or pairs up a medication with that genetic testing, and it's having very, very good success. Because some of these people out here, and I'm going to tell you, mental illness, not just ADHD, it's not just schizophrenia, it's not all those. It could be a mix of those. But some medications work well for one, some don't for some. So getting them genetically tested and getting the medications right for them may be all they need. Because I'm telling you, some of the medications that people take cause suicidal ideations. So we have to, once again, genetic testing it is a big, big deal, and hopefully they're going to be able to do that. Will you let me get the help? Will you promise not to kill yourself until we get some help? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Your willingness to listen and help, once again, all we need to do is give them a little bit of hope. Refer them. Suicidal people often believe they cannot be helped, so you may have to do more. There's no help for me. Yes, there is help for you. I'm going to call this number. I'm going to stay on the line with you. I'm going to be right here with you, and we're going to talk to them. We're all going to get you through this. The best referral involves taking the person directly to somebody who can help. Obviously, that's the best. And the gatekeeper or the way to do that is obviously through the ER. Then you get behavioral help. The next best referral is getting a commitment for them to accept help, then making arrangements to get help. A lot of times they'll say, I'll go to a counselor. I promise not to kill myself until I get that done. All right, I'm going to be with you. We're going to make the call right now to the doctor's office or wherever to get that done. The third best referral is to give any information in a good faith commitment not to kill yourself. and then get them help in the future. That's hard to do, is to leave somebody, but all we can do is offer them hope. We're not counselors, and we're not going to save everybody, but we're going to try the best we can to give them the help they need. Remember, since almost all efforts to persuade someone to live, instead of attempt suicide, we met with some agreement and relief. They'll get relief. They'll finally start to get a little hope, and that's what we're trying to do. Don't hesitate to get involved and take the lead. For effective QPR, say, I want you to live. I'm on your side. We'll get through this. Really what I want for them is to be safe. I'm going to keep you safe until we can get you help. Part of that comes through the assist training that we did, or I did. That takes it one step further, and we talk about guns. Do you have any guns in the residence? We need to get those out. Do you have any pills in the residence other than the pills you need for daily life, hypertension, high blood pressure, something like that? We're going to take those medications. We're going to keep you safe until we can get you help. Get others involved. Ask family, friends, bishops, priests, brothers, sisters, physicians, anybody. Join a team. Offer to work with clergy, therapists, psychiatrists, or whoever's going to be doing counseling or treatment. And then follow up with a visit, a phone call, a card, a text. Those two guys that I kind of keep track of, I usually send text about once a week to see how they're doing. Or if I see them, we'll talk about it. But that's all it is. It's just following up with them. When you apply QPR, we plant the seeds of hope, and hope prevents suicide. So any questions, just general questions about QPR? Tanya's going to go around and pass out some pamphlets. After that, whoever wants to grab some magnets. Great little magnets. You can stick them on your refrigerator. You can stick them about anywhere. The number 1-800-273-TALK is also the same number that's on the back side of your little pamphlet that she's going to pass out. That is the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. So if you get somebody that has suicide and they admit to you that they have suicide ideations and they're going to commit suicide or thinking about it, what you do is you call that number, 1-800-273-TALK, right where you're with them. Get them on the phone, say, this is Jeff Helmuth. I'm a QPR trained person. I'm with so-and-so. This person has some suicide ideations. I'm going to be right with them. Would you mind talking to them? And you hand that phone over to them. That's as easy as it is. So that number is on the magnet. That number's on the back here. I've got it programmed into my phone. So just in case I need it at any time, I don't have my pamphlet, I don't have my magnet, I have it in my phone. The other one is a 1-800-284-8439 is the bottom number. We talk a lot about it, and we talked a lot about here, mental illness. A lot of people have stressful days. A lot of people, things go bad, things go south. They just need help. That number at the bottom, 284-8439, is Parkview Behavioral Health. You call that number the same way. You say, I'm Jeff Helmuth, I'm QPR trained, I have somebody here that's having a bad day. What are the resources in LaGrange County that you can help him with? And you hand the phone over to him. Once again, they will talk about the resources at the doctor's office 3 days a week. They also have PBH where you can go in 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. They can help you get them the resources they need to get them through. Now, healthcare in general, you're going to find a lot of roadblocks, and that's probably the biggest thing that we have tried to do within Parkview Behavioral Health, or Parkview as a system. And we're making inroads. This QPR training that we're done, and one of the persons on that committee is the community outreach for Parkview Behavioral Health. So she very well knows what we're going through, what we're teaching, and what we're doing in LaGrange County. I will tell you that the rest of the Parkview system, the rest of this region, is following our lead. We're blazing the trail. We're farther ahead, way down the road than anybody else. So they're using us as an example. So they are helping with mental illness. They are helping with those roadblocks.
But I will tell you, insurance, Obamacare, however you want to say it, is not our best friend. They are very limited in what they can do. But having said that, we've got to get these people help. Parkview knows that, and they're going to do whatever they can.
I guess question for the law enforcement side that maybe we struggle with sometimes when we have issues or deal with citizens that have health issues or whatever. We get to the ER, we do our part. I mean, over 22 years, I mean, I've done a lot of counseling myself. I feel like a parent sometimes, umpire, so forth, so on. But then help me understand when we use the, I guess, commitment for help. What is it? Is it 72, 48, or does it depend on the patient and the doctor saying, you know what, you can go home now? I mean, because we struggle sometimes only because it's like a month later and we're like, we're back.
Same situation a month later.
Yeah.
The commitments mostly are 72 hours, 3 days. Can they fix mental illness or that kind of thing in 3 days? Not completely.
No, I don't know if it's because I know I can think of one gentleman now, if he takes his medicine daily, we're good.
He's just fine.
But he's also felt that, well, maybe I'm going to go every other day. And then it goes, well, once a week, and then.
Next thing you know, he doesn't take his medication. Or they don't like the way it makes them feel.
Yeah, I've had that told me.
Hear it a lot. It's a broken system. I wish at a high level, government level, they are talking about it. They're doing something. AFSP, American for Suicide Prevention, they're doing a lot at the government level, but they're running into the same roadblocks. I mean, obviously, it's politics. But yes, 72-hour commitment's really all you get. And then it's the doctor down there that does an assessment and says, you know, you're probably good to go. Follow up with some outpatient, or we're going to keep you. I mean, there's Parkview Behavioral Health. There's Bowen Center, which is based in Warsaw. Then there's Northeastern Center, which has a couple offices around. Northeastern Center does have an inpatient, but very few people do that. I will tell you, 2 of the suicides that we had in 2016, they were found by caseworkers of the people of Northeastern Center. So they were under their care. Saw them weekly. Most people see their family doctor within the last 30 days before they do commit suicide. It's a good question. I keep saying it's a roadblock. They keep hitting the same wall over and over and over again. It's changing, but it's going to take a long time.
Would you say something about vets? I'm putting this in my phone, so really 2 things. One of them is about veterans. We're having a real problem, especially with veterans.
Yeah. Really, depending on specifically what you're asking about, suicide within the veterans, it's really going to be the same thing. I mean, we've just got to get them to the resources.
I see there's a hotline on here.
Really, it's that QPR, the only one that we really ever do anything with is the 273 Talk, which is the national assistance. That's the number that I've got in my phone. So I mentioned it earlier on. I mean, at this point, the training's pretty much, yeah.
I found myself in a situation where I had a teenager basically seclude himself with a knife and saying he was going to off himself right there. And I felt completely hopeless. This is now, I don't know, 17 years ago or so. Is there, in LaGrange County, if I call one of these numbers, there's somebody that could, get up, come to wherever I am. If I
911. If you have somebody that really is that, in other words, they've went that far, they have a knife, they have a gun, or they're that far, yes, call 911. We're going to get these guys out here. We'll come with the ambulance, and we'll get them help. That is the fastest, the best way to get them into the system. It's not always met with an ease from them because they don't want to go, but if it's that imperative, yes, call 911. Don't even think about it. Just call 911. Absolutely. In the assist training, it's called the turning point. So what we get them to on the suicide hotline is a turning point. We want to turn them from committing suicide to I don't want to commit suicide anymore. So that is a turning point. How you get to that turning point is largely covered in QPR, but it has to do with listening. You get their story, and you keep asking them questions, and you keep digging, and you keep talking to them about their story. You keep talking to them about how they got to where they are. When was the last time that you were happy? Oh, well, that was blah, 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 blah. The next thing you know, they're talking about something that's a turning point, and that gets them turned. So the short answer is having that conversation or talking to them. And it was mentioned in here is we should listen. We should listen to their story. So that's what we're asking you going for, is getting them to a turning point. It's more have you taken the assist training? Okay. It's the same as the assist training, getting them to a turning point. Matt or I or whoever, we could actually talk somebody off a bridge if we wanted to, or we can because we've taken the training. It's not what we're asking you to do in this training. All we're asking you to do is listen to them, talk to them, refer them, and then get them help. It's a very good question, though. Any other questions? The reason I wanted to talk in the church setting, because there is that stigma, and this is not part of this. We can shut this off. This is more personal or more opening up the conversations within the religious community. So how many times is suicide brought up in the Bible? Anybody know? I can tell you it's in the Bible, and I can tell you it's 2,000 years or greater. So it's been in the Bible many, many times, and it's 7, if you really want to know. Saul was one of the last ones. The question is did he go into battle knowing he was going to be killed, or did he go into battle just wanting to end his life because he was done? So Saul is the 7th one. The whole religious community, and I'm not faulting him. I said it before. Let he who has no sin throw the first stone. That's probably why suicide has got the stigma it has for years. I love opening up these conversations in the church setting. I also know it does represent some issues. So, I don't know that Carol or Matt or anybody, and they can answer this if they want to. For me, I know what got me through my situation with Christopher. It was, number 1, my faith. It was, number 2, my family. And 3, my preacher. That person literally got me through the first 3 or 4 days because of what he told me. And I said it, is suicide wrong? Yes, it is. On many different levels, it's wrong. But is it wrong in the eyes of That man up there. Can you answer that?
That's tough.
Matt?
Yes. Just like every sin, but we aren't saved or damned based on our sin and our ability to keep the law of God. We're saved because Jesus' blood has covered us. So a Christian who sins doesn't have to fear damnation anymore than someone who's trying to keep the law.
We've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We have a forgiving God. We have a just God. The last thing is we don't know, and I don't know, the conversation Christopher had with God in the last minute before he did what he did. And I don't know that anybody can answer that question except for him. That allows me to sleep at night. That allowed me to get through where I am today, fully knowing that I am not the judge. So having these conversations with faith-based leaders is good for me, but for everybody that's listening to this or in this room, I believe it's a conversation that needs to happen, because when you go out and start to talk about suicide to somebody, especially in the religious communities, it's taboo. It's that's sin. I mean, that's damnation. I mean, you're going to hell. And people have been told that. I've been told that by people. And I know people are stupid. They're going to say stupid things. One of the best things that our neighbor told me the day after Christopher took his life is, just remember, people are going to say stupid things. They don't necessarily mean it, but they're going to say stupid things. And they did. And I told them, I says, it's not for me to judge. I don't know what happened to Christopher in the last minute of his life. I would like to believe he said, Lord, forgive me for what I'm going to do, and doesn't make it right. But it just means that hopefully he had a conversation with somebody. So that is a tough question. That's why I said even the tougher questions about medically assisted suicide or those elderly patients or those people that end of their life, they just want to go home. Anything wrong with that?
We never know the degree of brokenness that those people are experiencing. The thing that has helped me over the years more than anything else is the father of my best friend in high school committed suicide. And he was a Mennonite. This is going back in the late 1960s when the culture was much different than it is today. And I remember Janice and I going to that funeral and hearing that pastor say, some people die in accidents, some people die of heart attacks, some people die of another disease. This man, and he named him, died of mental illness. And that had a profound impact on me.
I wholeheartedly believe that people that do commit suicide, they're not in their right mind. I mean, I believe that is over and over and over from stories from people say the same thing. So they know not what they do. Good. It did. It helped me personally. It helped me, but I also have a lot of people that I'm talking to, and these are conversations that, once again, it's going to happen again in First Church of God. It's going to happen to other people. And those stances, exactly what you said and what you've said, is the same stance or the same stand that I'm using. It's a very tough conversation. It's a very tough question to ask. And it's a very tough conversation to have with religious people and or non-religious people. So I wanted to, like I said, this was probably one of the most ones I've been looking forward to. So, but it's as old as the Bible. It's as old as time. People have committed suicide way back, and I know they're going to commit suicide in the future. If we can stop 1 or 2 or 10. So, if any of you, we are going to try, we're doing some classes, more classes, obviously all around the communities in the fall. We're doing more with the LaGrange County Commerce Department. We're actually training everybody that's coming to the Commerce meeting in October, which is all the businesses in LaGrange County. So I believe hopefully it'll branch out to some of the businesses. Forest River has talked to us about it because 2 of their employees have committed suicide within the last year. So they're talking about having those conversations. So it's starting to take shape, but yep, fire departments. I've done all police, most of the police, and most of the fire departments in LaGrange County, all of our first responders. As I said, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. These guys know what it is. Police, fire, EMS live that stuff day in, day out. Those are the people we worry about most. And most of us have been able to deal with a lot of the stuff that we've seen over the years. We talk about it. When the people don't talk about it, I worry about them. And that's, once again, these guys right here. So. I'll be here for a while, so if anybody has any questions above and beyond what this was. But thank you. Everybody signed in? I will get back with Matt, and well, I can get you guys your certifications. Those are, it's just a certification. It does carry a 3-year, so you guys are trained gatekeepers right now, and it's good for 3 years, so I'll get you a certificate. Thank you.